Paris, 1941. A city under the weight of occupation, its lights dimmed, its whispers policed, its soul divided between submission and defiance. Few knew that amid the cafe conversations and Gestapo checkpoints, British intelligence had quietly embedded one of its most experienced field officers under a false name, Thomas Hale, codenamed Eclipse. Hale was a veteran of MI6's Section D, the division responsible for sabotage and subversion in occupied Europe. Trained in the quiet arts of deceit, dead drops, microfilm concealment, coded radio transmissions, he had already served in Brussels and Lyon, narrowly escaping capture twice. In October 1941, his mission brought him to Paris with a simple but perilous objective: to recover a cache of resistance codebooks captured by the Germans before they reached the Gestapo headquarters on Avenue Foch. If decoded, those papers could expose the names of dozens of French agents working for Britain's Special Operations Executive. But nothing in occupied Paris was simple. Hale arrived by night train from Dijon, carrying false identity papers marking him as Henri Dubois, a traveling wine merchant. Beneath the compartment floorboard, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a compact Enigma intercept receiver and a Colt 1908 pistol, the only real evidence of his true purpose. When the train pulled into Gare de Lyon, he stepped onto the platform and immediately sensed it, that peculiar silence of a city held captive. Boots echoed. Posters warned of curfews. The tricolor was gone, replaced by swastikas and German banners. He took a room in a modest boarding house on Rue Lepic, close enough to Montmartre's bustle to disappear, but far enough from the cafes favored by German officers. From there, he began piecing together fragments of the missing intelligence network. His contact was a resistance courier named Elise Fournier, a young woman who ran a small bookshop off Place du Tertre. Their system was simple but ingenious. She would insert coded notes between the pages of Shakespeare's Hamlet, the only English book the German censors never seemed to inspect too closely. Each evening, Hale would stroll into the shop, purchase a book, and leave a marked franc note as payment. The franc serial number would match a code sequence for his next rendezvous. It was espionage by routine, fragile and precise, until one night that pattern broke. The book he received contained no message. Instead, the inside cover was stamped with 3 words in English: "They are listening." It was a chilling warning. The Gestapo's counterintelligence branch, known as WWII, had recently intensified its efforts to dismantle the resistance networks across France. Radio direction-finding units, equipped with new German Wanze intercept devices, could triangulate secret transmissions within minutes. MI6 headquarters in London, through encrypted messages received at Bletchley Park, had already warned their agents to minimize radio use. Hale knew this, yet the urgency of his mission pressed him to risk exposure. In one of his surviving field journals, Hale wrote, "Paris breathes fear, and yet she still whispers secrets to those who listen." That entry, dated October 23, 1941, remains the last verified line written in his hand before his coded communications began to falter. Operating alone in enemy territory meant constant improvisation. He relied on disguised couriers, sympathetic railway workers, and hidden caches within the catacombs beneath the Latin Quarter. He changed lodgings every few nights, slept in churches when necessary, and carried cyanide capsules sewn into his coat lining, a grim reminder of what capture would mean. One evening, as German patrols marched along the Boulevard de Clichy, Hale met Elise in a candlelit cellar beneath her shop. She had obtained fragments of a captured British signal log, recovered from a destroyed resistance radio post near Chartres. "They're translating it," she whispered. "They know there's a British agent here." Hale nodded, understanding the gravity. Within days, his real name, might appear in a Gestapo file. The human cost of espionage was not measured in bullets fired, but in sleepless nights and vanished friends. Each message sent to London risked exposure, yet each hour of silence risked the entire network's survival. It was a balance of trust and paranoia, courage and concealment. By early November, Hale's coded dispatches to London grew sporadic. MI6 analysts at Station X flagged his signals for irregular encryption patterns, suggesting he might be transmitting under duress. But no confirmation came. The man known as Eclipse continued his work in the shadows, slipping through occupied streets, carrying secrets heavier than the pistol at his side. What no one in London knew was that Hale had begun to suspect betrayal, not from the Germans, but from within the network itself. Someone was feeding information to the WWII, guiding them closer with each interception. His last confirmed radio message from Paris ended abruptly, cache located. We'll extract before dawn. Trust compromised. After that, silence. As winter settled over occupied France, the name Eclipse vanished from the MI6 signal logs. London marked him missing, presumed captured. But in a war where shadows often told more truth than reports, no one could say for certain. And in Paris, the resistance whispered of a British agent who walked the streets at night, listening for secrets in the silence, an echo of a man the world believed lost. The candle had not yet gone out, but soon it would. By late November 1941, the city of Paris was tightening its grip. Curfews grew harsher, and the Gestapo's presence in Montmartre had become unavoidable. For Agent Thomas Hale, still operating as Henri Dubois, every step now carried the weight of exposure. The shadows that had once been his allies now felt like the eyes of an unseen pursuer. His safe house on Rue Lepic had been compromised. Twice in a week, he noticed the same man, a tall German in a civilian coat, lingering near the bakery across the street. Hale knew the signs. The Abwehr had likely intercepted a message or identified his courier line. But his mission was incomplete. Somewhere in Paris, the resistance still held fragments of the stolen codebooks, lists of agents, drop sites, and cipher keys that, if decrypted, could dismantle the British intelligence web across northern France. Hale's only remaining contact was Elise Fournier, the quiet bookseller who had risked her life to deliver MI6 microfilms disguised as literature. Her shop, Library Fournier, had become an unlikely hub for coded transactions. Inside, she kept volumes of Shakespeare, Dickens, and Milton, each hollowed at the spine to conceal slivers of film or handwritten notes. The two met only in brief, deliberate intervals, communicating through prearranged signals. A white scarf on the shop door meant safety. A black ribbon meant danger. But one December morning, Hale entered to find neither. The shop was open, the shelves in order, but Elise was gone. In her place stood a German officer browsing a copy of Macbeth. Hale froze for a heartbeat before turning casually toward the door. The officer glanced up but said nothing. Hale didn't stop walking until he reached the crowded streets below Sacré-Cœur, his pulse hammering. That night, he hid in a disused wine cellar beneath the Rue des Abysses, one of many abandoned resistance storage sites. There, under candlelight, he examined the latest microfilm Elise had smuggled to him a week prior. It contained fragments of intercepted German communications, references to an operation codenamed Greystone. According to the documents, Greystone was designed to plant false intelligence into Allied channels, convincing MI6 that Vichy France planned to defect to the Axis cause. It was a deception campaign, and someone inside British ranks had already begun taking the bait. In his field journal, Hale wrote, "The enemy doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes he signs our pay slips." It was a line later underlined twice by British debriefers reviewing his surviving notes. As winter deepened, the pressure intensified. Gestapo patrols swept entire neighborhoods. Parisians whispered about new arrests at dawn. Hale moved between safe houses, first to a sympathetic priest's rectory near Place Pigalle, then to an abandoned photography studio. His lifeline was a small network of railway workers who helped smuggle messages south toward the unoccupied zone. Yet even those contacts began to vanish. By mid-December, only one remained, a young resistance fighter named Luc Morel, an SNCF mechanic who operated the rail lines between Paris and Tours. Luc agreed to carry Hale's next dispatch out of the city. Together, they arranged a clandestine meeting in the tunnels beneath Gare du Nord. Hale arrived before dawn, his footsteps echoing against damp concrete. A faint beam of light flickered ahead, Luc's torch signal. But when he approached, he found only Luc's flashlight, still on, lying beside an empty satchel. That same morning, an MI6 listening station in southern England received a brief, untraceable transmission. The ghost walks Montmartre. It was a phrase never used in standard MI6 codebooks. Analysts debated its meaning. Some believed it a German taunt, others a signal from Hale himself. Either way, it marked a turning point. As 1941 drew to a close, Hale realized the enemy had penetrated deeper than he imagined. Every move, every meeting seemed anticipated. Whether through betrayal or brilliant counterintelligence, the Gestapo now hunted him by name. He began to prepare a contingency plan, an emergency extraction route toward the Spanish border. But before escaping, he intended to finish what he started, discovering who among his allies had sold their secrets. In one of his final confirmed communications to London, Hale sent a chilling report: Greystone is real. Madrid compromised. One of ours is feeding them. Will confirm. London's reply was brief and unhelpful. Proceed with caution. Priority. Recover documents. Caution, however, had long since ceased to be an option. That winter night, in a dimly lit cafe near the Seine, Hale spotted a man reading the Times, an English newspaper nearly impossible to find in Paris. He recognized the face instantly, a liaison officer once attached to the British Embassy in Madrid. Their eyes met for a second too long before the man stood and vanished into the crowd. Hale followed, but when he reached the street, the man was gone. It was then that Hale began to believe the unthinkable, that Greystone was not merely a German deception, but a joint operation, one entangled with double agents within MI6 itself. He returned to his flat and wrote his final recorded entry of that month. If I disappear, tell them I was not taken. I walked into the dark by choice, and then nothing more. By Christmas Eve, the WWII had issued internal memos referring to an English operative, alias Eclipse, now believed to be hiding within Paris. Yet, despite the sweeps and interrogations, no trace of him appeared. Still, Paris whispered. In the bars of Montmartre, people spoke of a lone man in a dark coat who walked at night, leaving coded notes in the pages of old books, messages no one could read. A shadow among shadows. Next, his mission would take him straight into the heart of Operation Greystone and toward the betrayal that would seal his fate. January 1942. Paris lay frozen under a gray winter sky, the city's heartbeat muffled by snow and fear. The Germans called it Die Ruhigkeit, the quiet time, but for MI6 agent Thomas Hale, the silence only meant that someone was listening. Weeks had passed since his last message to London. His network had collapsed, his couriers either captured or in hiding. Yet Hale remained, a ghost in plain sight, sustained by his mission and by a question that gnawed at every waking moment. Who had betrayed them? The answer, he believed, was buried within the operation codenamed Greystone. Through fragments of intercepted German radio traffic, Hale learned that Greystone was more than propaganda. It was a multi-layered deception campaign orchestrated by WWII II under Colonel Franz Hallmann. Its goal was to feed MI6 fabricated intelligence suggesting Vichy France was planning secret alliances with Berlin. But Hale's instincts told him there was another layer, a British connection, an inside man turning London's own networks against themselves. He needed proof. Under the guise of Henri Dubois, Hale arranged a meeting with a contact from the French resistance in the back room of a shuttered art gallery near the Boulevard Saint-Germain. The contact, an elderly archivist named Jean Codard, handed him a small envelope sealed with wax. Inside was a carbon copy of a German intelligence memo dated January 12, 1942. The memo referenced an informant within British diplomatic channels in Madrid, providing details of MI6 operatives operating in France. One name was circled, Eclipse. That night, Hale wrote in his field notes, "I have been sold. The hand that offered me this mission is the same hand that now guides the enemy's knife." Hale's suspicions turned toward the British Embassy in Madrid, a diplomatic post long rumored to be infiltrated by Axis sympathizers. The embassy had been a key relay point for resistance intelligence crossing from France into Spain, and from there to MI6 headquarters in London. If Greystone had roots in Madrid, the implications were devastating. Every resistance network in France could already be compromised. To confirm the connection, Hale needed to intercept a message courier traveling south. With the help of a remaining contact, a railway conductor loyal to the resistance, he arranged to board a cargo train bound for Tours, carrying shipments destined for the demarcation line separating occupied and unoccupied France. Hidden in the false floor of a freight car, he listened as German inspectors moved through the train, their boots echoing like hammers against the steel. One word caught his attention in their conversation, Greystone. The inspectors spoke of a recent German success, an agent captured near Madrid who had confessed under interrogation to working for London Central. The details matched Hale's operations too closely to be coincidence. Someone had stolen his reports and delivered them to the enemy. Upon reaching Tours, Hale narrowly evaded capture during a Gestapo sweep. He made his way to an abandoned farmhouse on the Loire, where he transmitted one last message to MI6. Greystone confirmed. Spanish connection verified. We'll trace route back to source. No acknowledgement ever came. Meanwhile, in London, MI6 analysts were debating whether the message itself was genuine. Some believed Hale was sending false signals under German control. Others argued it was proof he had discovered something dangerous, something London wasn't ready to face. The truth would later emerge through declassified documents. Within the British Embassy in Madrid, a cipher clerk named Arthur Loughton had been feeding the Abwehr with coded fragments of Allied operations since 1940. It was this same man who had transmitted Hale's mission orders and later his location to Berlin. Hale had unknowingly been sent into a trap designed to expose MI6's infiltration networks. Back in Paris, the consequences of that betrayal were closing in. Elise Fournier, the missing bookseller, was confirmed captured and interrogated at Frayne's prison. Under duress, she gave away fragments of Hale's operations but refused to name him. The Germans now knew a British agent was still active in the city, but not who. Hale's notes from those days grew increasingly fatalistic. One line stood out, written across the margin of a crumpled page. "Our war isn't only in the shadows, it's within our own reflection." That sentence, recovered decades later, will become a lecture topic at the Imperial War Museum, a lesson in the paradox of intelligence work, how truth and deception often become indistinguishable. By the end of January, Hale returned to Paris. The city had changed again. The Gestapo occupied new offices along Avenue Kleber, and the resistance had been driven further underground. Hale now operated alone, communicating with no one. His task had shifted from intelligence recovery to survival. But one unfinished duty remained: the stolen codebooks. They had not been destroyed. According to one whispered lead, they were being transported through the city under the protection of a German courier unit. If Hale could intercept them, he might still salvage the mission and perhaps redeem himself in the eyes of London. He prepared meticulously. Forged documents, false uniforms, escape routes. Every move calculated. Yet even as he planned, he knew the net was closing. The Gestapo had begun referring to him by codename, Der Engländer. On the night of February 2nd, Hale set out for his final operation. The streets were silent, the snow reflecting the yellow light of street lamps as he crossed the Pont Neuf, his collar turned high against the cold. In the distance, church bells tolled midnight. Somewhere behind him, a footstep echoed. He turned, but saw no one. Paris was watching, and so was history. The man called Eclipse was about to vanish into the dark. Spring turned to early summer, and with it came new shadows in Britain's war rooms. At Bletchley Park, deep within the Buckinghamshire countryside, a team of cryptanalysts led by Commander Edward Travis had begun noticing a pattern. Amid the endless stream of Enigma intercepts from occupied France, one term appeared repeatedly in Luftwaffe and Kriegsmarine traffic: Operation Regenbogen, Rainbow. The word meant little at first, but each time it appeared, the messages originated from the Lorient Command Sector, the same region where Flight Lieutenant Harold Hawk Davies and Sergeant Tom Ridley had disappeared, and where Peter Jordan had photographed the strange circular constructions. Something was unfolding along the Breton coast, something the Germans were concealing behind layers of camouflage, code, and silence. At RAF Benson, Jordan was called once again into briefing. The room was tense, the air thick with cigarette smoke and worry. Wing Commander Wallace, who'd become increasingly gaunt since Davies' disappearance, laid several newly printed photos across the table. "These," he said, pointing with a pencil, "are from a secondary analysis of your last sortie. Notice the rail line here, running not toward Lorient, but away, east into the hills. And these vents? We believe they're for underground structures." A murmur rippled through the room. Underground facilities near Lorient? It was unprecedented. The Germans were known for building submarine pens, but nothing of this scale inland. "The ministry is concerned this might be connected to experimental weaponry," Wallace continued. "Our friends at Bletchley intercepted more traffic referring to large-scale tests scheduled for August. If they're right, this could be something entirely new, something we must understand before it's used against us." For the pilots, it was both a validation and a burden. Their quiet reconnaissance flights, lonely, unarmed, and often unacknowledged, were suddenly at the center of one of the war's deepest mysteries. Yet the danger was escalating. The Luftwaffe had begun installing radar outposts along the coast, making high-altitude approaches riskier than ever. Still, the next operation was approved: a low-light reconnaissance over the suspected Lorient inland sector, using the new Spitfire PR-Mk11 prototype with extended range. The pilot chosen was Flight Officer James Jock Hensley, a quiet Scot with nerves of steel. His mission: to photograph the eastern rail terminus and confirm the nature of the underground construction. He was to fly at dawn, alone as always. While Hensley prepared for his flight, Miles away at Bletchley Park, cryptographers led by Alan Turing and his section chief, Hugh Alexander, focused on decrypting one of the region-bogan messages partially recovered from the naval Enigma. The decrypted fragment read, "Material transit complete. Launch infrastructure nearing readiness. Phase 2 under command of General Dornberger." The name Dornberger struck a chord. Intelligence records identified him as Major General Walter Dornberger, the head of Germany's secret rocket development program at Piedmont. Until that moment, the connection between Luria and Dornberger had been speculation. Now it was chillingly plausible. Back at Benson, Hensley's Spitfire lifted off into the gray dawn of May 8, 1942. He climbed into the thin blue stratosphere, leveling off at 32,000 feet as the French coast unfolded below. The first few camera runs went smoothly. But then, approaching the inland clearing, Hensley reported unusual turbulence, not from weather, but from powerful updrafts. His final camera exposure captured something that even he didn't immediately comprehend: the faint outline of a massive, circular pit lined with scaffolding, surrounded by vehicles and cranes. Within it, what appeared to be a towering, cylindrical structure. The last recorded note in Hensley's flight log, written hastily after landing that afternoon, read simply, "Structure resembles launch cradle. Possible rocket assembly site?" The analysts at Midnam were stunned. Comparing Hensley's photographs to earlier ones from Jordan and Davies, they noted the steady progress of construction over just 3 months. The circular platform now bore structural reinforcements. The rail lines appeared to terminate at the site's edge, suggesting heavy transport. And above all, the German secrecy surrounding it, no nearby anti-aircraft emplacements, no visible personnel, indicated its extreme importance. In Whitehall, the Air Ministry convened a closed meeting with representatives from SIS, MI6, the Ministry of Aircraft Production, and Bletchley Park. After hours of debate, a single conclusion emerged. If the Germans were indeed testing long-range rockets, they could soon threaten Britain itself. A clandestine operation will be needed to confirm it on the ground. One officer, a liaison from the Special Operations Executive, summarized it grimly: "Photographs can only tell us so much. If we're to know the truth about Luria, we'll have to send men in to touch it." That decision would set in motion one of the most dangerous covert missions of 1942. But for now, Bletchley's deciphered fragments were filed under ultra-secret, unseen by most of the very men risking their lives to gather the intelligence. The pilots of RAF Benson flew blind in more ways than one. Late one evening, Peter Jordan walked alone along the perimeter of the airfield, the summer wind tugging at his flight jacket. The hangars were quiet, save for the hum of generators. He paused by Hawk Davies' old locker, still marked with a small white tag, "In service." Jordan murmured, "We're closing in, Hawk. Whatever they built out there, we'll find it." But the truth waiting in those French woods would prove more perilous and more haunting than any of them imagined. The war had moved on, but the mystery of Thomas Hale, MI6's agent, Eclipse, remained unresolved. By 1945, as Paris was liberated and the Gestapo's files fell into Allied hands, fragments of his mission were recovered. Yet, the most critical pieces, the final movements of the codebooks and Hale himself, were absent. What emerged instead were cryptic notes, intercepted transmissions, and declassified intelligence pointing to something far more intricate than anyone had suspected: a clandestine betrayal intertwined with Operation Greystone. MI6 documents declassified decades later revealed the last known signal sent by Hale. "The candle is out." The phrase, sent from an untraceable transmitter in Paris' 16th arrondissement, had puzzled analysts for years. It suggested a planned extraction or the successful completion of his mission under extraordinary conditions, but the specifics were never clarified. Some historians theorized that it indicated Hale had been picked up by a covert MI6 or resistance team, whisked out of occupied territory before the Germans could capture him. Others suspected the worst, that he had been eliminated to protect secrets about the internal betrayal that Greystone had exploited. The post-war investigation, led by Sir Nigel Carver, a former MI6 historian, pieced together the evidence available. Documents showed that the operation had involved coordination between London and Madrid. Hale's intelligence had exposed a mole inside the British diplomatic channels in Spain, but the mole's identity remained redacted. Carver concluded that Hale's disappearance was not an accident. It was an exchange, a silent maneuver in a game of spies where even death was sometimes negotiable. Meanwhile, the microfilms containing resistance intelligence were partially recovered. Some had been hidden in abandoned apartments, while others disappeared completely. Reports hinted that German officers had attempted to deliver certain documents to Madrid, but the trail went cold in neutral territory. MI6's post-war assessment described Hale's mission as critical but incomplete, acknowledging that the full impact of his work might never be fully known. Despite the gaps, the surviving records revealed the resilience and ingenuity of Hale's efforts. He had successfully coordinated with local resistance, intercepted key German communications, and operated undetected in a city teeming with enemies. Elise Fournier, whose fate remained tragic, had safeguarded fragments of intelligence at great personal risk. Their efforts had delayed the Gestapo's dismantling of French networks long enough for other operations to succeed. Even today, Hale's last movements and ultimate fate continue to spark debate among historians and intelligence enthusiasts. Was he extracted by MI6, eliminated to protect secrets, or did he vanish into neutral Spain to continue clandestine work? The truth remains buried in the shadows of wartime secrecy. One of the final entries attributed to Hale, found in his hidden journal decades later, encapsulates his life in occupied Paris. The mission survives because it must. My fate is irrelevant. The unseen work is the work that matters. The disappearance of Eclipse remains one of World War II's most haunting intelligence mysteries, a testament to courage, secrecy, and the uncertain line between heroism and disappearance. And yet, even as archives were opened and historians debated, one question persisted. What did Greystone truly achieve, and how much of it hinged on the man who walked into the night and was never seen again? The shadows of Paris had claimed him, but his legacy endured in the surviving whispers, encrypted transmissions, and unfinished intelligence trails left for posterity. The story of Thomas Hale was far from complete. Years later, long after the guns fell silent and Paris returned to life under peace, a discovery brought Thomas Hale's story back into focus. In 1974, during renovations of an abandoned safehouse once used by the resistance in the 16th arrondissement, British diplomats uncovered a small, dust-covered journal hidden behind a false wall. The leather-bound notebook, yellowed and fragile, had belonged to Hale. Inside, Hale meticulously chronicled his movements in Paris, his interactions with the resistance, and the threats posed by the Gestapo. Pages described coded messages, clandestine meetings, and the precise methods he had used to protect microfilms from falling into German hands. But the final entry was the most enigmatic, a single line accompanied by coordinates. The truth sleeps beneath the river. The coordinates pointed toward the Seine, near one of the bridges Hale had crossed countless times. MI6 investigators debated their significance for years. Some hypothesized that Hale had hidden a cache of intelligence, never to be retrieved, ensuring it remained out of German and later Soviet hands. Others speculated it marked a meeting point for a secret extraction that had succeeded, though no evidence of such an operation was ever found. The discovery rekindled interest among historians and intelligence operatives. Declassified MI6 records confirmed that Hale's disappearance had been noted as exceptionally mysterious, and his last confirmed signals were cryptic enough to suggest a planned vanishing rather than accidental capture. London's official stance remained deliberately vague, preserving the secrecy of what might have been an extraction, a capture, or a clandestine reassignment. Hale's journal, combined with lingering testimonies from surviving resistance members, painted a portrait of a man operating under the constant pressure of life-and-death stakes, navigating betrayal, and executing one of the most complex intelligence operations of World War II. Elise Fournier's eventual post-war interviews confirmed that Hale had been both fearless and methodical, yet the fate of his last mission, the microfilms and the ultimate extraction, remained an enigma. The Seine, flowing silently beneath Parisian bridges, became a symbol of Hale's unresolved legacy. The line "the truth sleeps beneath the river" was both literal and metaphorical, a reminder that some secrets of war never surface, even decades later. MI6, historians, and intelligence enthusiasts continue to debate what Hale achieved, how he vanished, and whether the final pieces of Operation Greystone will ever be fully understood. In modern Paris, the story of the man known as Eclipse is whispered among intelligence historians and guides of clandestine wartime tours. Tourists walk the same streets Hale once did, unaware of the danger that once stalked Montmartre, and the city itself preserves the memory of those shadows in its hidden alleys and forgotten cellars. The legacy of Thomas Hale endures as a testament to courage, ingenuity, and the uncertainty inherent in espionage. One man vanished, leaving behind only clues, whispers, and a cryptic journal. And even today, more than 80 years later, the ultimate fate of MI6's lost spy in occupied Paris remains one of the most haunting mysteries of World War II. Somewhere beneath the sane, the truth still sleeps.